All right, today on the show, my guest is Lou Eytalis of Strategic Realty Services in Wichita Falls, Texas. Let me tell you more about Lou. Lou Eytalis is a real estate broker and owner of Strategic Realty Services based in Wichita Falls. Lou has been licensed since 2010 and has dedicated her career to empowering clients, promoting fairness, and challenging the systemic barriers that plague our industry. As an advocate for change, Lou is currently pursuing federal antitrust litigation against major industry organizations, including the National Association of Realtors, to address issues like monopolistic practices, forced memberships, and excessive fees that disproportionately affect minority professionals and small brokers. Throughout her work, Lou strives to create a more transparent and equitable real estate industry. She's passionate about collaboration and education, encouraging agents to share knowledge and resources to better serve clients. Lou's mission is to reshape the future of real estate, ensuring it become more inclusive, fair, and accessible for everyone. I want everybody to follow Lou. She has a Facebook group dedicated to this cause, which we have a link to in the show notes, and she has a GoFundMe as well, as if you'd like to contribute to help her in her journey. Before I bring on Lou, I just want to really quickly make a quick disclaimer that the reason we're doing this episode, number one, is I think it's particularly interesting, right? We want to hear about agents and their challenges with our industry and our industry partners, our industry, associations. I think that's important. Dialogue is good. We're not here. I'm not here in particular to take any stand one way or the other. I just want to report what her issues are and get those out to our audience to see whatever all of you think. And the reason we had Lou on is we had a lot of people reach out to us and say, you need to have this woman on. She's doing this really interesting thing. And I've been following the story as well. In the future, we would like to also ask N.A.R. to consider coming on to address some of these issues that she'll be bringing up. But want to bring on Lou. Lou, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me.
I am excited to chat with you because I think dialogue is good. I've always thought that was one of the things in this last presidential election, and I don't want to sort of get political at all,
Yeah,
but I
right.
sort of missed the fact that there wasn't really dialogue about, the
hmm
sides weren't really talking to one another, or, and it just was like you became this tribal thing. You chose a side. And I
Yeah.
think it's good to have all the information so that people can make an informed decision. And I also want to mention that, I am a current member of N.A.R. I think that's important for
Me
our
too. I
audience to
am.
know.
I am still.
And so is Lou. Yeah. So we are here just strictly to report what Lou's doing, why she's doing it, and you can obviously make up your own mind about what you think the best course of action, if any, is. But Lou, let's start before we get to sort of your issues with with our associations. Let's talk about your journey. So tell us how
My
and why you got
journey.
into real estate.
Well, I kind of have to go back a little bit farther than 2010. But I was actually interested in getting into real estate when we were stationed in North Carolina. And because I was married to a military member. And then we got orders for, I had just started taking my classes in 2004. And then we got orders for Okinawa. So we wound up living in Okinawa for 4 years. And, but I was, like when I came back, it was still very much in my mind that I wanted to do this. I'm very kind of independent. I like to think outside the box. I don't really like to have a boss. I like being my own boss, and I had a little bit of taste of that when I was already in Okinawa. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time when we were here in North Carolina. And so when I was in Okinawa, I started my own business there with a website doing more importing Japanese crafts and stuff like that. And that was extremely successful, and I really enjoyed working for myself. So translate that back into the United States was hard because obviously I'm not able to access the product when I'm in the States. So I thought to I kept thinking about real estate. And so I really wanted to go to college and get my degree as well. And while I was doing it, I was like, well, why don't I also do real estate on the side while I'm going to college and I've got my 2 kids. And then so it was I was doing a lot. I was working 40 hours a week regularly,
Oh my
going to
goodness.
college for but my bachelor's degree full time, and then also taking my real estate classes and being a single mom with 2 kids. Uh
I always love the expression, if you want something done, give it to a busy mother, because they seem to kind of do incredible things, like all of the things you mentioned simultaneously.
and time is of the essence, so I mean it was very easy for me to get. I actually got my degree in 2.5 years, and that was pretty amazing. My kids were great too. They were very supportive. They were a little bit older. My son was 14 and my daughter was almost 8 at the time, so I was able to have a little bit more freedom to do those things and still take care of them. So in that essence, I was pretty lucky. Um, and then I got my real estate license and I was starting to do it part time. But when I moved and when I came back from Okinawa, I wound up in Wichita Falls. This is where I came. The reason why I came here was mainly because I had my sister in Denton, and then my brother was getting orders for Tinker and in Oklahoma. And so this was kind of like a middle place between the two. And also there was an Air Force base here, so I was able to maintain TRICARE and all that kind of stuff for my children.
Sure.
So it was just a convenient place to go, and I liked the fact that it was a small-ish town, not like super metropolitan. My kids could still be in a small military community, and we'd benefit from those kinds of still being able to access the base when needed. Um, it was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning there, because obviously I didn't have a really big sphere of influence. A lot of the brokers in town, whenever I reached out to them about sponsorship, they basically tried to discourage me and be like, "Well, if you don't know anybody in town, you're really gonna struggle. You're gonna have a hard time." And I did, but it kinda just pushed me to be like, "Okay, well, watch me. Watch me do something. I don't know. Don't tell me I can't do stuff."
There have been so many people we've had on the show who people just tried to dissuade them, and that became the fire that got
Yeah.
them to work late into the evening and
Mhm.
got them to succeed. So
And
it's
I think yeah.
certainly, yeah,
I think that definitely made a difference in how I approached my journey in real estate. Because when I work hard. When I worked hard, I saw results, and that really just kind of pushed me to do more and be more active in real estate. It did take me a little while to actually go full time. I wound up staying part time and doing full time regular job because I needed medical benefits, and I mean, you have other things going on, and I was kind of still a little bit new to the area, and I wasn't super comfortable with the market. I went the route of doing REOs
sure.
because that's more consistent for me. When you get a listing, it's pretty much a guaranteed sale. And those listings were, even though they're a little bit more work, I wasn't afraid of the work and they're less commission. I wasn't greedy or anything like that. But I just wanted to have something that was more flowing and steady. And I was very interested in doing REOs, like the whole aspect behind not kicking people out and obviously foreclosing on their homes, but because that's not where I'm at, but just the process of how it works. And being a part of that was it has been very educational so that I can know all of the ins and outs of everything.
I would imagine it got you really good at valuing homes.
Yeah, and it
Y-
and it introduced me to the market, and because I had to do BPOs and I had to do, I have to do BPOs every 3 months pretty much in on
sure.
any of my listings. And it definitely gave me a crash course on the areas, on the towns, because we cover about 6 different counties here in Wichita Falls.
Wow.
So, there's a and I'm the listing agent for Fannie Mae for the top 13 counties of Texas.
Wow.
So I wind up with a lot of listings out in the middle of God's country. But go ahead.
So, no, this is it's super interesting. So you started on the REO side and BPOs,
Mhm.
and then how did you make the transition into more traditional style deals?
Well, that's where I once I decided finally after my son graduated high school and my daughter was starting high school, or no, she was starting middle school. Um, I decided that I was ready to go out and do this full time. I had already been in real estate almost 5 years at that point. I was getting my broker's license, and if I was going to become a broker, I knew that I needed to just go out and do it. And I didn't originally intend to become a broker so that I could sponsor agents because I wasn't really in that headspace at that point. I was still really doing a lot of REOs. I just didn't want to give commission to my broker. Um, and so that was one way for me to kind of like get out of that and just be my own boss. And I did that. I finally cut the umbilical cord with my job and went straight out into the industry, got a little office, created a little company that I was just doing as a DBA. I even called it something just very personal to me. I always my handle has always been Saucy Louise, and so I called it Saucy Louise Real Estate.
Love it.
And and I just went from there. I had that first year. I went from I think it was only like 15 transactions that first and second year. I did 77 transactions in like 1 year.
That's incredible.
And it was just amazing how well it went. I mean, I had investors beating my door down that were wanting REOs and wanting investment properties, and I had it was just me and my little assistant.
Wow. And
Um,
now you have a brokerage with dozens of agents. You have really grown.
well, yeah, and then that's when I started getting approached by agents that wanted to join me, and rather
Sure.
than, um, like it's kind of hard to have a guy going, "Oh, I work for Saucy Louise Real Estate," and my purple sign, like all the things that I did. So thought about purchasing Strategic Realty because the broker that had it had already sold it once before, but had taken it back. And he was older and he was wanting to retire. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to purchase something that's already well known. It's been around for 20 years. They already have some agents in the office, and so I went that route. I stepped in as the primary broker and purchased his brokerage, and that wound up being Strategic Realty, and then it just went from there. Um, right now I'm trying to grow. Right now my vision is evolving and it's changing, but I envision that real estate is going to change. Even from the brokerage side, it's going to change to more of a membership style brokerage. There might be some traditional ones and some mom and pops and stuff like that, and maybe even the bigger ones like Remax and EXP and those big franchises that are still going to go with the commission splits. But I envision a future where everything is based on membership.
Very interesting. So yeah, let's talk about
And so that's where
uh
I'm kinda, like, trying to veer
yeah,
into.
we are. Let's talk about it. So you have made headlines, a lot of headlines, and really you're the first person I'm aware of who has really been vocal enough to take action about what you perceive to be our issues and inconsistencies with the National Association of Realtors. So I would love for you to lay out your issues first. Let's talk about what you see are the primary concerns that you have with the National Association.
Well, it's kind of threefold. They like this three-tier system, and I have 3 problems that I think, Like everything goes in threes, right? Um, Primarily, I think that they've lost their mission statement. Their original mission statement was to create a, comprehensive continuity across the board within the real estate industry, and to support agents and create an actual hub for us to be able to communicate our listings and be able to sell faster, sell better, sell to, broaden our reach to be able to serve our clients better. And right now it's become a just like a pretend police force, because they don't really have authority over us, but they're pretending that they do, and they're exerting that authority above their mandate.
Interesting. So,
That's one
yeah.
side, like
So that's one. Yeah.
with the cooperation agreement, it starts kind of like right there. And even, like the cooperation agreement, I think was an overstep, an overreach of their business power over us. We as business owners we're independent contractors, right?
Right.
Like they shouldn't be able to mandate the way that we run our business. They're there
Yeah. It's
for
very,
our support,
yes.
not to tell us how to do things.
It's very interesting because here in Illinois, just from an employment perspective, we are what's called a right to work state, which means that the workers have tremendous rights here in our state. I imagine I don't know how it works in Texas. However, what's interesting is we're seeing brokerages come under scrutiny who are treating their agents, who are independent contractors, as
Like
if they are
employees.
employees.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so we're seeing lawsuits start to take hold there. And it sounds like you have a similar argument to make that the National Association of Realtors
Yeah,
does something
they're
similar.
just that they have this gross overreach that they're doing now, and even with the NAR settlement that they just did, that was a massive gross overreach, because now they're basically mandating how we as a brokerage handle commissions, like that we have to negotiate, that we have to do these forms, and a lot of agents don't realize that those forms are not mandatory, not by law. In no state are those forms mandatory. The only mandatory forms that we have as real estate licensees is the ones that are produced by our association, by our real estate commission. So
Interesting. So
any of
to make
those
sure,
forms that they require, the brokerage, the buyer's rep, and the listing agreements, and all of those forms are voluntary. We're choosing to use them. They produce them for our benefit, not because they're required
so they're not required by law, but they tend to be required by
by the membership.
associations.
By the membership, they're required by the membership. Um,
Gotcha. And you
but
feel you
even then, they're not required by the membership. They're produced for our use. But if we have an attorney produce a different form, we can use those forms instead.
interesting. So do you feel that in a way members are maybe held hostage isn't the right word, but held to the whims of the associations when even though it's not maybe uh, a legal issue, it's more
Mhm.
of a membership issue.
Right. And so they mandated, or they settled with court and said that we're going to make all of our members have their buyers sign this buyer's rep agreement, and we're not going to allow them to put their commission into MLS. Um so and if they sign this membership agreement, now they're forcing the brokerages to negotiate their commission, and they shouldn't be touching the commission. It should not be their business how the commission is done,
Gotcha. So the
because
commission
I should
agreement,
be able to set that I have a fee, period.
sure.
Like my fee is 6%. And if you don't like that, then there's other agencies that you can go to. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that that's what I do, but
Sure.
I should be able to do that, and by them saying that we're gonna make them sign this buyer's rep, and we're gonna make commission negotiable, even though it's always been up to us to negotiate it, not for them to tell us that we have to negotiate it.
Got
See
it.
what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah,
It
that's an interesting
it's
point.
always been negotiable. Anything is negotiable. Anything in the contract has always been negotiable. However, for them to actually tell us that we have to negotiate and that we can't put it somewhere where it's clear and concise to the other agents what the commission has been negotiated for them is also kind of like a conflict of telling us how to do our business.
Yeah, so I see your perspective is that we the system wasn't broke enough to need a fix.
Yeah,
Is that yeah,
that was and by them settling, they also created precedent. They created case law. They created, oh, like what I'm seeing right now in the industry, as far as like the way that agents are treating this whole thing, is that now they feel like they have permission to discriminate.
can you explain that? Tell me more about that.
Well, because the whole reason why we got into the lawsuit in the first place was because sellers felt like they were being forced to pay a buyer's commission, or they were like told that they might not sell their property as fast if they didn't
Mhm.
pay. And so now with this lawsuit settlement, now the agents in town are calling all of the listings that they're about to show, like they haven't even showed it yet, and finding out how much the commission is. And then they go to their client and say, this, and this house do not offer buyer's commission. Do you want to go see them? And they're saying no.
Right.
Of course, like they don't want to go see those houses. So now, basically, those houses that are not offering commission are being discriminated against. And
Gotcha.
we can
Yeah,
legally do that now.
right. And I want to also touch on your perspective of the commission agreement sort of impacting minority or socioeconomically challenged groups.
And
That
okay, so yeah, and that's another thing too, is that it creates a situation where somebody that can't afford to come to the table with even $3,000, and so we get creative as agents to make sure that we get them grants, and we get them down payment assistance, and we get them closing costs from the seller. We might increase the sales price a little bit to accommodate for some things too. um, those people are now being told that, well, I mean, we've always told them that the commission is XYZ, but now they're facing an additional $5,000-6,000 potentially to pay a broker to help them find a home. And these are people
I
that have never never bought a house before. So it's
yeah.
discouraging a lot of first time home buyers is what I'm thinking.
It's making it definitely it's a different
It's a
it's a
different.
bigger it's a bigger challenge, right? Because
Mhm.
now people have to have cash on hand, which not everyone
Or
does.
or they're not actually using agents.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Yeah. So,
Mhm.
are you seeing that a lot in your area where you're seeing a lot more transactions that bypass at least one side of it's bypassing an agent?
Yes.
I imagine a lot of sellers. I don't know that we're seeing this a whole lot in Chicago. We have seen it where they're basically sellers saying, "Let's try it without. I'm going to list it with the realtor, but I'm not going to offer a co-op commission, and then let's see what happens."
Yeah, let's
And
wait till get we and you know what? It's always kind of been that way in one way or another. I've always
sure,
told my listings, I'll list your property for XYZ 6%. If I get both sides, then I might, we can talk about the commission, or if there's another agent, I'm gonna give them 3%. I've always been upfront about that kind of thing.
sure.
And they always try to negotiate the commission, and I'm always open to it, at the onset of the listing. some agents and some brokers aren't, but I am seeing right now that there's a lot of um, agencies that are, and they're, it's just so, it's like the wild, wild west. Some agencies that are only offering 2.5%, and they don't have to disclose what they're getting.
Right.
They could be charging 6% and only giving the buyer's agent 2.5% and keeping the other 4.5%. So it's creating a lot of, it's basically made a lot of the regulations, or not regulations, the N.A.R benefits kind of obsolete, especially with that cooperation agreement. You know, like, yeah, we have a co-op agreement to work with other agents, but do we?
That's interesting. And I think we only got to a couple of your key pillar points, so I feel like
Mhm. Okay, so
let's head back.
that's number 2, that they just overreached their authority, and then, uh, number 3 is the fact that number 2 is the fact that they are tying all of these memberships together. Like, I can't pick and choose just to be a part of N.A.R, or just to be a part of TAR, or just to be a part of WFAR based on the services. It should be voluntary. If they're gonna make it voluntary, they need to make it voluntary. You know?
And now when you typically, at least how it works here in Chicago, is when you join a local association, you're automatically joining
You're
the state and
automatically
national.
entered.
Yeah.
Right. Then don't say that it's not mandatory. You know, make it mandatory. Make it, you know, and for brokers it makes it mandatory no matter what. Yes, the real estate agents can choose to join or not, and um and that's where the whole tie-in comes in, where the real estate agent that joins pays their own fee, but the non-realtor or the non-member winds up getting, um, if they work with a broker that is in N.A.R, the broker has to pay their association fees
Yeah, let's
regardless.
talk about that, because this was an issue for you where you received a bill. Tell us the story. This is kind
Okay,
of what
so
spurred you to take action.
correct, and the way it all started was I sponsored an agent here in Wichita Falls, and she was doing real estate here. She was part of the association, but then she moved to Houston and got out of the association here and was going to join down there, but wound up having a stroke and just kind of got out of real estate. But wanted to stay active so that she could still get referrals, because she still had a lot of family here in Wichita Falls, and she was referring a lot of those clients to me, and I was doing the listing or selling the house or whatever for her, and then just giving her a referral fee. And obviously, you can't do that if you're not an active agent. So she just wanted to remain active, and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, do what you need to do. I'm not super I'm very flexible when it comes to, thinking a little bit outside the box. And then another agent, and I didn't really even think to tell the brokerage, the association, that that's what was going on. I was just like, I wasn't really fully aware myself on the way that worked, because I'd only been sponsoring agents at that point for like 4 years. So it'd never been an issue where I had to, like, I'd never sponsored a non-member before. And then another agent approached me, that was going to get an employment with a apartment complex down in Dallas area, and they required that this agent have an active license. She wasn't going to be doing any real estate, but she needed to have her active license in order to do leasing, um, for whatever company she was working for.
She was an in-house leasing agent essentially,
Right.
but she needed an active real estate
Mhm.
license to do
So
that.
she
Got it.
needed a broker to sponsor her, because
But because
they're
you're a
not a
member,
brokerage.
they have to be members,
Right. And
and you
like I
get the
said,
bill.
right. Well, like I said, I didn't really know that that was a thing, like, my broker never told me that. He just told me, "You have to be a part of the association," and he never really explained all of the background behind it, and I mean, that's a lot of problem with our industry is we don't really educate everybody on how it works, and even a lot of agents nowadays don't understand that those forms like, I learned all of these things through this journey, um, and I'm telling now everybody that I come across is like, "Those forms, because everybody's complaining about them, and I keep telling everybody, "Those forms are not required." So, you need to make sure that you tell your agents or tell that you remember it's not mandatory by the state that we're in. It's not by law required that you sign those forms. If you don't wanna use them, you can use something else.
And so let's go back to the 2 agents that
But,
were
yeah,
not
so
actively practicing.
I kept them in my roster, and I got an email from my association saying that Tar had notified them of 2 non-members that
So
hadn't
the
signed up.
state and TAR is the state association for
Texas
Texas, correct? Okay.
Association of
Got it.
Realtors, yeah, had notified them that I had 2 non-members, which to me is also, like, what the hell?
So basically you had one agent that was just doing referrals,
Yeah,
really not participating other than to
didn't even
pass
live
a
in the
lead.
area. Mhm,
Right, just said, "Hey, I have a friend who needs help," and pass the lead to someone.
mhm.
And then you had another agent who goes, "No, I just have to have this somewhere, but I'm not doing uh,
Transactions, she didn't
any
need
actual
access.
transactions. I work in-house for a
Mhm,
company that owns the building or manages the building I work in, and I'm in a different area, but I still have to have it active and legally in order for me to be able
mhm,
to do these."
mhm.
And so the state says, "Hey, we noticed these 2 people aren't members of your local association." The local comes back to you and says, "What?"
And basically says that, they need them to come in and fill out an application and fill and pay all these fees, um, or I need to unsponsor them. So I need to fire them or I need to make them pay.
Right.
And I was, like for me, I was like, what like, what gives you the authority to do something like that? To tell me how to run my business and who I can hire and fire or sponsor or not sponsor. But, that was my initial reaction to it, and then they were like and then, so it went from there. It we they explained that it's in the bylaws and all this stuff and showed me where it was in the bylaws, and it was just so confusing because it's really not in the bylaws, like, as clearly and concise as they made it sound. Like, it says that yes, it does say that the broker is responsible for, every sales to pay for the association annual dues for every salesperson in the firm. Now that's about as clear as it gets, and, to me, that leaves a lot for interpretation. Like, are you talking about the firm within the jurisdiction of the bylaws, which is only 6 counties? So then the ones in Houston and Fort Worth wouldn't apply? And if jurisdiction doesn't matter, then why wouldn't Oklahoma also fall under the same thing? Because they're with my firm. I have a brokerage license over there, and they're all under Strategic Realty. So that's still under the umbrella of the firm. Do I have to pay for them to be a part of our association? Like there's a lot of ambiguity in our bylaws as it's written. And um, and then it's not clear what the punitive damages are. Like it says that I'm supposed to notify them of any non-members, but it doesn't say if I don't report them, what happens. And so they get to choose how they punish me for not reporting these members. I'm like, but so they just and rather than having a conversation or trying to work us as members, they just go straight to punishment. Like it was very punitive the way that they treated the whole situation. And it lacked any. any outside thinking, like I told them what happened. I explained to them what the situation was back in May, and I asked him to go to the board and see if they would either do a waiver or have some sort of exception to this situation. And in August, the last day of August, I got an email with an invoice from the board saying that they voted and that I needed to pay for both, that they weren't gonna give me a waiver and that I needed to pay for, both of those agents going back to the date of sponsorship, and it wound up being like $3,500 for the annual dues, the the MLS fees, the Century Lock fees, the application fees, the membership startup fees, like everything was included from kit and caboodle, even though they never applied. They never participated, they never accessed any of the benefits of the services, like, it was just totally backwards, like, and then to boot, they threatened that to take me out, to terminate my membership, which was coercive and almost like this racketeering kind of, feeling when it just it upset me to the point where I almost just said, "Well, fuck it, sue me," kind of thing. But then I, I thought about it and I didn't want to. Basically, it would have shut me down.
Right, you
I
would have
didn't have any
affected
alternative.
you would
It
have
would have
affected all your other
effectively.
agents.
Right,
Yeah.
because that's where the tie-in comes in. They make
Right.
it
So
to
you
where
you
the
felt strong-armed.
broker. Right. It makes it the way that they have it set up, they make it so that it's required for us to be a part of the association regardless of whether or not we sponsor agent, like, regardless of the fact that the agents have their own membership. So it ties us all into this big, huge lump. I have to get a membership here at WFAR if I have agents that want access to MLS here. I have to be a part of the association in Denton if any of the agents that I sponsor want MLS access down in Denton. I have to be a part of every single one of these little associations, regardless of whether I'm in the area. Um, but obviously Wichita Falls is going to be my primary.
Right.
So it
So
ties me to all of these little agents.
and you feel you've even used stronger language where you feel that it is in a sense a reverse pyramid scheme. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, because they're getting enriched from me. They're getting money from me instead of me bringing money into the business via having people sign up. It's costing me every time I sign somebody up. So that to me is a reverse pyramid scheme. But
and so what ended up happening with the your local association issue?
well, like I said, they threatened to terminate my membership if I didn't pay it by X date or whatever, and it happened to fall, like, right around Thanksgiving, and that created, a lot of anxiety for me, so I just wound up paying the invoice under duress, even though the way that they did it violated even their own process in the bylaws. Like, they didn't I disputed the invoice, and it didn't change the clock, like, in the bylaws, it states that on I think it's this is pretty much on everyone that you if you don't pay an invoice by the 3rd month, like, they hadn't even invoiced me at the beginning. Like, the whole time between May when they notified me of these non-members, they didn't send me an invoice at that point.
Hmm.
So it's not like there was any financial obligations that I was pending at that point even. We were just having a discussion about the members themselves. They didn't invoice me until the end of August. And at that point, they invoiced me for everything rather than just for the annual dues. And they claimed that because it was too late, that I'd already violated their blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm like, if there was an option to only pay the annual dues, why didn't you send me that invoice and then wait until I declined to pay that invoice before escalating it further? You just went straight to escalation. and then they took it to the board before they even gave me the invoice to dispute. Like, they made all of these decisions about penalties and fines and stuff before I even got there. So to me, it felt very, very punitive, very, very unfair. Like, it wasn't. It was just the wrong way that
It
they
was
treated it.
basically you felt that it was a shut up and pay us scenario.
Right. It was just a very coercive, money grabbing opportunity for them, and they went all out.
And so with all of the issues you're sort of bringing to the table. Actually, before we get to sort of
Well, let
your
me finish
yeah, go ahead.
that portion of it. So basically, by then, I had actually already unsponsored these 2 agents because now I'm afraid that they're gonna continue to charge me this stuff, and I'm not gonna pay that. So basically, I had to fire them. Um, and now, going forward, I just I was not able to sponsor anybody that didn't want to be a part of the association. So in essence, they're also tying my ability to increase my revenue.
So you feel it's this
It's limiting.
so from the top down, you feel it's so intertwined and so um just rigid that
Mhm.
you as a business owner are limited in what you can and can't do,
And that
even
goes
when
to them telling me how to run my business.
yeah, that's
Even though they
interesting.
claim that it's not mandatory, and even though it's not mandatory, they tie it also into MLS access, and that's number 3. If they had no tie-in to MLS access, they then this wouldn't be an issue. If I want something as essential as MLS, because MLS is essential for all of us as realtors, all of us as real estate agents. That's essential to our business. I if they untied that, then this wouldn't have been an issue, I don't think.
Yeah,
Let
so
me
you'd love
rethink that one real quick. Let me rethink that one real quick because, I do think that MLS is it MLS has its benefits, obviously, but having it at just a local level is very uninclusive.
sure.
So, it
People
forces.
outside that area would have a hard
Right,
time.
right. But however, if we want access to it, them tying it into the memberships is also, bad for us as it's also an overreach, I think, in the business sense of free trade and antitrust laws and whatnot.
And so you feel that the problem starts all the way at the top, top being N.A.R. as the sort of
Mhm. The
supreme
parent. Mhm.
parent company, or the parent association. And tell us what you're doing right now. How are you? What would you like to see done? And let's start there. What would you like to see changed?
Well, and this goes back to I've been doing a lot of research on the lawsuits that have occurred in the country over the years. And back in the 80s, there was a pretty big lawsuit that changed the way that NAR treated MLS because back at the beginning, NAR did have control over MLS, and they got sued in the 1980s. And so they said that they won't have any for monopolistic and antitrust laws and stuff like that. And I think it was in California where they got sued. But so that's when they pushed MLS to be at a local level, controlled at a local level instead of at an R level. So a lot of these responses that we're getting is that NAR doesn't require that you have MLS access in order to be a part of the association. Um, because technically they don't. But when they tie themselves into the local association, then by default they're requiring it because the
Right. So you
local
feel that that's like
association.
a sneaky way
Oh yeah.
to get what they want
Right. They
without
said,
right.
okay, so we won't have control over it, the local associations. Every time that they have a lawsuit, and if you go back and you look at all of these lawsuits that they've had over the years, instead of changing the way they parent, or the primary directive is at their level, they push it down to the local level. Everything, like MLS, the dues and fees that are set by the local association, the everything that they've been sued for has been pushed back. Even the now new one, they've pushed it down to where it's now at a level where the MLS, which is controlled by the local board, controls how MLS deals with the commission.
Interesting. So you feel like they're passing
Rather, they're passing the
responsibility.
buck. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
passing the buck down below, but so basically they're not changing really. They're just not requiring it anymore. So they're turning it down to the boards down locally for them to require it, because they have to approve the bylaws of all the associations to make sure that it is in line with their mandates.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt that that was an, I found that to be confusing when NAR came out and said, "Well, you don't have to be a member." But to my knowledge, the vast majority of local and state associations are members.
Mhm.
So, there isn't another option really.
Right.
I- So, why not just say, yeah, you actually, I mean, why not be transparent, I guess, about that?
Right, and they're all about transparency, right?
So, do you think that this is just a systemic issue that it needs to be the NAR needs to be overhauled? Do you think they should be just erased altogether? What
Okay.
are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you could do either one. Either one is going to be beneficial for the industry. The only reason why I still think that NAR, I want to give NAR a chance to do the right thing, is because they do have the reach. A lot of agents, the reason why they don't come forward or they don't speak out is because they are afraid to rock the status of the status quo. They're afraid to change those things that they like about it, or they're afraid to lose access to MLS, which
Sure.
is the primary reason why we go with a lot of these associations in the first place.
Yep.
Um, excuse me. Um, or they're, like, we change our every time we change the way things do business, they have to rethink their own strategies as far as how they gain customers. And like, change is not very easy for anybody, especially the older generation of realtors that have been doing this since the beginning of time, and are might be a little bit more technologically inclined, I mean, challenged. um there's a lot of fear that that they don't want to change. So if NAR made the changes on their end, it would be easier for the industry than getting rid of them altogether and starting from scratch.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
how fast would that be? It would take so much longer for everybody to veer from the thinking that NAR is good. So the amount of control that NAR has right now would be beneficial for the membership, because they could change everything if tomorrow, like that.
And why do you think do you feel I'm curious to get your answer of why you think they don't make those changes. Is it because that you feel that they can just push it down the line to the
They don't
state
want to
and
lose
local
control.
association?
They don't want to lose the control. Like or it's a failure of it's a failure of imagination. They have all the control right now, and they say, well, this is how it is, and if you guys don't like it, then tough. Find another way to do it. And guess what? There's really not another way to do it.
Right.
And so then they don't have then they have to sit then they can sit back and do nothing, because nobody so it's twofold, really. If they refuse, then we must, as an industry, terminate them. So I would like to give NAR an opportunity to make these changes, to have an overhaul. But we don't have the time to sit around and wait for them to come to their senses. We have to make them come to their senses. Or we have to change our way of doing business now. I foresee in 5 years we could be the next travel agents. Our
So
industry.
you're worried about being replaced by technology.
Right, totally. I mean, the amount of AI interaction in our lives right now is astronomical.
It it is
It
something
is
that is not,
intense.
and it is not being talked about. This idea that yes, agents have value and they should be compensated. I don't think anyone would disagree who is an agent. If you don't
Absolutely.
think you have value, then you should get out.
But
And we also
that's not the conversation that we need to be having. We
right.
need to be having the conversation that how are we going to compete
Yes.
in the future of this industry? Not that we don't have value and that we shouldn't expect to get paid. That's going to happen. We need to stop worrying about that and we need to worry about how we're going to keep the business.
Yeah, what happens when AI? So it's funny. I ask ChatGPT all sorts of problems that I can't figure out, and within 5 seconds, it has
Done.
an answer for me. It's not always accurate, but what happens when AI is going to be better at negotiating because it has access to billions of data points than any human being ever could? How critical? And again, that's not the only value an agent provides. Obviously, we know
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to rely upon and even check their agents recommendations, and we are human, we're
Against
prone
ChatGPT. Yep.
of course, and that is going to create a challenge to keep the perception of value
Mhm.
um,
The reason
there
why we tell people to use us as agents is because we're telling them that we are the experts, that we
yeah,
know how this is gonna work, and that the process of buying a home is so stressful that you need us to be able to make that big purchase less difficult. And if they can go on to ChatGPT and just type in, "How do I buy a house?" and it tells them everything that they need to know, even gives them all the forms, gives them all of the data that they need, then what do they need us for? If we
yeah.
don't make ourselves indispensable to the industry, then we're gonna be dispensed.
And how do you think how do you think we can make ourselves indispensable?
We need to create better processes, better ways of doing the business that we do. Whether I mean, right now everything is like the Wild West out there. There's so many different products, there's so many different CRMs, there's so many different um like Brokerment and Zip Forms and Dot Loop and all this other stuff. I'm not saying that we need to create a monolithic program, but we need to bring something together to where like my vision, if N.A.R had any vision, they would have created a platform with realtor.com as the consumer side and then a platform for the agent side of that. And it would have been all inclusive to include like a showing service that we could pay for, like levels. That's what I envision that the future is going to be. It's going to be a membership style MLS service, kind of like one that already exists right now that is used by a lot of the local agents in a lot of these rural areas and even some bigger areas like New York is My State MLS. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Hmm.
Um, but if you log into their platform and you pay their $45 a month, you have access to all the state forms pretty much for every state in the country because it's national. You have access to national listings everywhere. You have access to marketing material that you can use, and they produce this every month with new ideas, new Canva backgrounds, new little quips that you can customize a little bit here and post it on your social media. They also provide add-ons for showing services. They also um, and it's inexpensive, and they're very communicative. Anytime that
Yeah.
you have a problem or an issue or whatever, you just send them a text or give them a call, and they're there.
I was surprised too that the maybe the lessons learned from what Zillow was able to do in the early 2000s when they came onto the scene and said, "We're a tech company and we
Mhm.
understand human behavior, and we're going to create a very appealing product that's
For the
totally free
consumer. Mhm.
for the consumer that bypasses the gatekeeper, the agent, because we're gonna basically pull all those listings, and now they're a broker in every state, so they
Mhm.
because they're an MLS member, they get those listings, and and also we're going to value each home that's out there, and and they have created. I think the Zillow touches over 90% of all real estate transactions now.
And if they created a platform for MLS, then NAR would be done because
Yeah,
they
it would
could
be
do
almost
that.
a game over
Mhm.
scenario.
Yeah, if they created their own back-end MLS plugin, I guess is what you would call it, it would be over, and they could charge the brokers a little membership fee or whatever, and then we wouldn't need any of the services of NAR and TAR. The only and it's really funny because every single one of these associations have their own level of benefits and services. And we're obviously now as members, we're starting to see which one provides us with the most. And NAR, I've logged into NAR twice in probably 15 years. I don't know why they're even necessary at this point. I don't know what services they provide anymore. They used to provide discounts and I mean, really, the only thing that they provide is the acronyms that people can,
You can
like the
call yourself a
GRI,
realtor.
and yeah, and you can call and you've earned the right to call yourself a realtor for $156 a year.
But to their credit, they also have a powerful lobbying part arm of their organization for the
Lobbying,
industry.
right? But lobbying hasn't really paid much in dividends to us at this point.
Yeah, it's debatable about what the effectiveness of those
Right.
lobbyists are when with a $420 million payout. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
as a member, how did you feel about? Obviously, you felt that their reaction to losing the lawsuit was a bit of an overreach, in decoupling the commissions and making it a little bit more challenging for agents, in your opinion, to have those conversations, and maybe more challenging for first-time home buyers
All
in
the different
particular.
forms that they added to our repertoire is more cumbersome and confusing. It makes it very confusing for these agents, especially the older ones. I mean, the younger ones are going to get used to it because it's all that they're going to know. But the change that it created for the older ones is getting to be a really big burden for a lot of brokers because
And
they're
it
having to.
probably creates a lot of anxiety in broker owners like yourself, because you're ultimately responsible for
Yeah.
everything the agents do. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, a lot of it's unnecessary, and it's not always succeeding. It's actually causing, like the one that Carla's lawsuit over in Louisiana. She had an experience where one of her agents lost a $15,000 commission because one of her buyers went and saw a property that was being shown as a open house, and when they went to the open house, the listing agent had them sign a buyer's rep
Yeah.
just to see the property,
That's
which
that's a
is
tough one.
not necessary, which was completely not necessary. It's not part of, but it was permissible. And so, like based on the interpretation of the rules, they're saying, we have to make everybody sign a buyer's rep whenever they want to see one of our houses. And that's not a requirement. If
So
it's
it's
your
almost like
listing, they just haven't explained the rules succinctly enough that people are getting it, and they're taking advantage of the ambiguity in a lot of ways.
Well, and they have to be losing membership because people are just leaving the industry in droves. And yes, of
Right.
course, there's a lot of factors
Going
that
inactive.
contribute to that.
Mhm.
The rates are obviously higher than a lot of agents would prefer and buyers would prefer.
Mhm.
Listings are a lot of us are just, I
We're
would love
losing
to know
listings, yeah.
what I would love to see NAR address is what about the 85% of American homeowners that have a like sub 4% loan? Like
Mhm.
what's good, like that's a huge problem.
Mhm.
And if somebody doesn't come up with a product or a solution to encourage, I mean, we can just wait for people to have to move, and that's of course kind of what we're doing now.
With
But
foreclosures, you mean?
well, no, I just mean, life events, people
Oh,
have to
right,
move
right.
or they decide to move. But boy, again, I'm not blaming NAR for this. I'm just hoping that they could say, we've got a real problem here. There's a huge bottleneck that we're going to see in the next few years for listings if
Mhm.
we don't sort of figure out a motivation for a borrower to take a much higher rate. And I don't know what that solution is, but we sort of all just go, well, it is kind of what it is, and that's true. It is what it is,
It
and
is what it
that's where
is,
we
yeah.
are. But someone needs to be working on a solution to this because so many people are hamstrung. So many
Mhm.
owners are hamstrung going, well, I don't want to double my payment to live in the same type of property or stuff, the same value if I sell and repurchase. Again,
Because your interest
I
rate's gonna be, like, twice as what you're, paying in the past.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
And
well,
and
the
again,
only solution to that is gonna be to for the interest rates to go down. They need to go
yeah.
back down to something that's a little bit more comprehensive, and I think that I'm hoping that with the new administration and, that a lot of the issues, a lot of the overblown prices is going to kind of level out, and we're going to be able to get back to 4%. I mean, I don't think that we'll ever get back to 2%, but something a little bit more accommodating and a little bit more reasonable. Even if it
Yeah.
goes down to only 4% would be great for the consumer.
Well, Lou, you have laid out your grievances with the associations at all levels. I think it's been a really
Well,
interesting
okay.
conversation.
So let me just add in there the second invoice that they sent me, which is the one that actually put me over the edge and had me going into the lawsuits, is really the one that we haven't talked about. But um, just very quickly on that one was the second agent that um, he was already an agent before, and he just wanted to reactivate his license so that he could do some stuff part time. And he's down in Fort Worth, and I'm a part of the association down there in Denton. And I told him, like, I'm a part of this association. So once I sponsor you, just go over there and fill out their application. However, I never heard from him again. And this was like right at COVID timeframe. So
Sure.
I was extremely busy, and he never spoke to me again. He never was part of any of our meetings. He never asked for access to the platform. I gave him access, but he never to like my back end platform, but he never finished the onboarding process or whatever. And I never heard from him again. And I just totally forgot about it. Well, I get the same thing. I get an email from them stating that there's a non-member reported, but with this email, they automatically sent me an invoice immediately for the $1,700, which was all the fees, the application, the MLS dues, MLS quarterly fees, and the annual
So now you're
dues
going through the same situation, but
scenario.
a
Right.
different process.
Right.
And so now you're like, well, there's not even consistency within the process here.
Right. So they sent me an invoice right off the bat, and I disputed at that point, and I called up the director, and he's like, "Well, you've done this before, so that's why we went, like you've already been warned."
Ah,
So I was like, "Well, I'm not paying it." And guess what? Now, and this was right after the settlement, so I was already aggrieved by because of that, and I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna take you guys to small claims because This is bull crap. I don't know if you can swear on your thing, but
Oh yeah, it's
I
fine.
got the okay. I suffer from a little bit of the cursey words, um, friendship or addiction. Um, I try to keep myself clean because I'm doing all these podcasts, but sometimes it's a better way to communicate. But anyway, so I went to small claims and filed there and had them served, and that was back in August of last year. Now, in November, I get an email from the board, from him, saying that the board voted on the invoice that had been sent, even though I disputed it or whatever. I never really had much of a chance to actually talk to anybody at the board about it. I That they voted that it was valid, and that if I didn't pay, I got the letter on the 22nd of November, and then I had to pay by November 5th.
December 5th.
No, November 5th. I mean
Even
November
though you got it,
27th. Sorry, I got the invoice by November 22nd, on November
you had
22nd.
a 5-day window to pay.
And right. And I had a 5-day window to pay this invoice of $1,700, and that just, like, um I contacted a couple of lawyers in the area, and nobody really wants to get involved in it. Nobody, like, lawyers aren't exactly kind of like us, where we just kind of want stuff done now, and time is of the essence. And you know, I've got an emergency here. They're about to kick me out. They're about to, like, affect my business right at Thanksgiving again. 1 year later, and at this point, I'm just done. So I had spoken to a couple of agents, I mean, not an agents, a couple of attorneys, and they had mentioned, when I went to the class action, they immediately hired an attorney. So, I mean, when somebody else, the other party, hires an attorney, especially in small claims, I don't know why they hired an attorney in small claims. It's stupid. But and it's obviously our dues that are going to be paying for it. Um, when they did that, I went and I talked to a couple of attorneys in town, and none of them wanted to deal with it, because they felt like they do a lot of business with local realtors in town, and um, they didn't want to lose their own business by defending me in this case. And so I went outside the area a little bit, and most of the attorneys that I spoke to said that it probably should have been filed in federal court and not in small claims, because if I was going to charge them with anti violations or violations of the Sherman Act and the Antitrust Act, that was more of a federal issue. Small claims would have only been able to handle anything that I paid. So the invoice that I had paid already, was valid, but the one that I hadn't paid, I had to take to federal court. So I went ahead, and because of that email, I went ahead and put together a complaint based on, I went and I looked at all the other complaints that had already been filed by then, because already the Michigan one, the class action at Michigan, had been filed. There was one in California, and there was one in Pennsylvania that had been filed. And I kind of hodgepodged mine to have the same language and issues as theirs, including the invoice of the $1,700, not the $3,500 one, because that one was going to be dealt with in small claims. But the $1,700 one was the one that I included in the federal, and I asked for an injunctive relief to keep them from just terminating my membership. That was the important part, because small claims couldn't give me, like, a restraining order or anything like that. And that's one of the reasons why, that was the primary reason why I filed it in the first place, was because I was I was at I was in danger of losing my business right before Christmas, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, "No, you guys are totally, you went one step too far." And the sad part about it is that these are for the board is made up of my fellow agents.
Right.
So these are other people in town that are voting. So it felt very punitive. It felt like, oh,
Your competition is voting.
my competition is voting against to close me down. And I'm not the big kahuna in town. Most of the people that are on the board are in those big ones.
And if we look at the actual reason why these agents weren't paying, it was because they're not in the area or they're not
They're not
participating.
accessing. Yeah, they're the level of harm versus the benefits to the association is totally skewed on my side. Like
Right.
the harm is on me. To them, it doesn't cost them anything. It just enriches them. It just gives them more to the coffers of their organization. To
Mm.
me, it closes my doors. And
Yeah.
that is a violation of my rights as a business owner. That's a gross overreach of their power.
Well, well, well argued, and very interesting point. I'm interested to continue to follow, your case at the federal level and see, what happens. We're obviously watching all the lawsuits, and it's very interesting to see where things are headed.
I'm seeing
And
like right now we're still at the beginnings of everything, so there's not really much to report. But if they want to get more information as we go, they can access that Facebook page because every time I have to respond or I get a response from them, um, from the courts or whatever, I try and keep everybody up to date on that. And so
well,
far, the only response that we've gotten is a motion to dismiss, which I've responded to. They're trying to get it dismissed on with prejudice. Oh, and
well,
and we just finished the small claims a couple days ago as well.
oh, how did that go?
It was interesting. It was definitely practice for me because if I don't win, I'll chalk it up to practice and I might take it to appeal if I don't win. It just depends on if they award them attorney's fees because they're asking for like $9,800 in attorney's fees.
Oh, wow.
So if they go that if it goes that route, then more than likely then I will appeal it. Um The judge hasn't ruled on it yet, like, the case itself, we just presented our case at this point, and he's gonna be ruling on it probably either he said that it would probably be next week before I hear anything. But as far as the case is concerned, I think that I laid out my case fairly succinctly, and it was my basis was just the fairness of it all, and the
Mm,
fact that the bylaws are not clear and concise, and any ambiguity based on there's a statute, it's called the Restatement of Contracts section 206, that states that any ambiguity in a contract must be interpreted against the party who wrote the contract. So any ambiguity in the contract itself in the bylaws must be interpreted against them. And I pointed out several places in the bylaws that it's just ambiguous and not clear. The jurisdiction issue itself is not clear because it does state that they only have jurisdiction over 6 counties. So, is it jurisdiction over me, jurisdiction over the agents, jurisdiction over the firm? Like, is there a cutoff? And if there isn't a cutoff, then why does other states not apply? Like there's 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 way too many questions to be had. Um, Another ambiguity is that there is no provisions in the bylaws for real clear that they clearly had the right to do the things that they did. Like, yes, it does say that within 10 days I must tell them about any non-members in my firm, but it doesn't say what the punitive damage, like what the punishments would be if I don't.
yeah.
Like it doesn't turn around and give them the authority to go and bill me $3,500 and then threaten to terminate me if I don't pay it. Doesn't give them that authority.
Well, for all of our listeners who are interested in, following Lou's cases at the local and the federal level, as well as just, wanting to support her mission, she has two ways you can do that. There's a Facebook group. We'll have a link to that in the show notes, and there is also a GoFundMe where you can contribute to the defense fund to that she is mounting, and for the costs associated with, taking on. The industry associations. So,
And that
Lucy,
and those things are also for other agents too. Like if there's other agents that have similar issues that they need help with, I'm more than happy to give them, you know, my experience and let them decide what they want to do at that point. If they want to be a part of the Texas lawsuit, they can also reach out to me and I can see what I can do on that. If they want to start their own lawsuit, that would be also, a good place for them to go to get some information about how to go about it, and also anything that's raised in that GoFundMe, if it's above and beyond what I might need, which I'm sure right now, I'm hoping that it is, so that I can also help other people and other lawsuits that are already out there fund their attorneys and get the assistance that they need in order to be successful. As
Lou,
ultimately, we want the change. We need the change in this industry. Otherwise, we are going to be the next travel agents.
well,
We're going the way of the dodo bird, y'all.
I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate the courage it takes to talk about something like this. I think that is not an easy ask for anyone. It's also not it's an easy ask. Actually, everyone's got an opinion about it. But
Mhm.
for somebody to take action and to be publicly taking action while running a business that is seemingly in conflict with, you know, with some of the issues that you're addressing is a tremendous.
I'm finding that there is a lot of people that are out there that support the efforts that I'm doing and are like you, they applaud the efforts, or, they understand the courage that it takes. But I would just state that it doesn't take a lot of courage to do this. It just takes a minute to say enough is enough. I mean, I don't feel like I'm a trendsetter or anything like that. I feel like I just, I'm just that fed up with it. And we need to not be afraid to speak up, because otherwise we can't complain. We can't complain about the way things go.
That's a good point, and it's easy to complain, and it's not as easy to sort of request change from the people that can make those changes, and so
And
you know
ultimately, I also feel like if NAR and all of these associations really intend to be supportive of our mission, our businesses, they will make the change. The way that they react to all of these lawsuits is going to be very indicative of how much they are actually working for us. I think. I feel like, if they don't, I'm not saying settle. I'm not saying, make us go away and give us money. I'm saying the change, because most of us don't want to settle. Most of
right,
us
you want
are
to keep
gonna,
running your business,
yeah, we want to see the change. We want to
right?
be run our businesses better. So I don't see that this is going to go away just by throwing money at it. So they're gonna have to make that hard choice. Are they gonna be supportive of what we're telling them that we need, or are they gonna just make it go away and
Well,
continue with their bad acts?
perfectly summed up. And for all of those that want to continue to support Lou in her efforts, the Facebook group and the GoFundMe are in our show notes. And also, we encourage I would love to have a conversation also with someone at N.A.R. To sort of talk about what changes they're working on to maybe address some of these concerns. We will be hopefully coming with a future episode with someone, a representative there, that can give us a little bit more insight into
Yeah,
what
I
their
would love
roadmap looks
to.
like.
I would love to hear what their ideas are, and I'm more than happy to collaborate with anybody at NAR if they want more ideas on how they can improve our industry because we're the boots on the ground. We're the ones that actually do the work. We're the ones that are actually down in the trenches and we know what we're facing on a daily basis. And we can tell them very distinctly what we need in order to improve the industry. And they need to start listening to us. Otherwise, we're gonna get rid of them.
Well, I really appreciate, Lou, you coming on. We talked for we had a great long conversation. I appreciate your willingness to share with my audience your perspective, and also I know we have tens of thousands of listeners. So for those of you that want to continue or want to support Lou, we have those links in the show notes,
I
and
appreciate
also
you.
yeah, and we, on behalf of our audience, we thank you for your time. Also, on behalf of Lou and myself, we thank the audience for sticking around to the end. We appreciate you as listeners or viewers. Please, as always, the best way that you can help us continue to grow is by telling another realtor about this podcast. Everyone's got an opinion about the changes that have been happening. This might be an episode to share with them to get their thoughts, because perhaps they would have thoughts that were either consistent or not with Lou, but at least they know this conversation is happening. And I think conversation, as I said at the beginning, is always good. It always can lead to improvements. So whatever improvements, if any, need to be made, they need to happen through dialogue. So I appreciate you, Lou, sharing your perspective. I'm very excited to hopefully bring someone from N.A.R. on to talk about their perspective and just continue to provide the audience, with information they can make up their own minds. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on. And on behalf of all of us, we thank our guest Lou, and we thank you, the audience, for continuing to support us. And we will see everybody on the next episode. Thanks, Lou.
Thank you.